when we were working on State of Decay 2, we went back and forth a lot about whether NPCs should consume ammo. And we probably had about 5 different scenarios in mind at different times before we finally shipped the version we did, which was NPCs just they just pull ammo out of like a magic portal somewhere. It just comes to them. They're able to just basically they're able to fire a gun as many times as there's room in the magazine, and then they reload the gun, but they're reloading from nowhere. They're like not taking that ammo from anywhere. So ammo just doesn't exist for them, whereas it does exist for you. And we thought about a version of it where they actually did fire real bullets, and you have to actually like put ammo in their inventory. But that was when we were imagining a version where you had a lot of control over when they fired guns. We were thinking, oh, maybe we'll have squad commands. Maybe we'll tell you, maybe we'll be able to manually tell NPCs, go loud. And if they go loud, then they can start firing their gun, and you've decided that it's time for them to expend ammo. And most of the time you would not do that. So that they keep that ammo for emergencies, but not just use it all the time. We thought that might be enough. Even in that case, that might not have been enough, because an NPC could empty their gun wrong into the wrong zombie or miss a lot, and players would still get frustrated that they had exhausted the resources. But at least that would be enough control to feel like, okay, if they fired their gun, I could have stopped them, and it would feel a little bit less like the game was just wasting your bullets all the time. One thing we were never going to do was just say, oh yeah, they just are constantly taking bullets out of your supply locker and using them, and you have no control over it. Like, that's a version that we thought everyone would rebel against. Another thought we had, so there was a time early in the development of State of Decay 2 where the model for resources that I was proposing was that resources were floats. And I mean, so I'm using, they probably actually already are floats. But what I actually mean is resources are not pegged to specific integers. It's like, you always, in State of Decay 2, you've got, 5 fuel, 13 meds, 45 materials, 16 food, whatever. You never have 16 and a half food. You never have 16.3 food. It's just 16 food. The version of the resource system that I was originally pitching for State of Decay 2 was actually much bigger, larger, chunkier increments of resources, where one rucksack was equal to one of that resource. You bring home a rucksack of fuel, you put it in, and you've got 1 fuel now. But you expend that fuel in increments. And so you've got, 1 fuel, and then you gas up your car. Now you have 0.75 fuel. And then you make a Molotov, now you've got 0.5 fuel. Something like that. So like basically we would just use arbitrary amounts of the resources to, while you were expending them. And when we had that model in mind, I proposed that when your NPCs are firing their guns, that they would just draw tiny, tiny increments from your ammo resource. And because ammo didn't need to be like, 16 ammo, 15 ammo, 14 ammo, 13 ammo. It could be 16 ammo, 15.999 ammo, 15.998 ammo, 15.997 ammo. If it worked like that, then we could let them, and like take smaller amounts for 22 bullets, much larger amounts for, 5.0 and grenade launcher bullets. And we could have it actually cost ammo, but have you not have to worry about, am I restocking their resources? And we can have it, have the bullets that the NPCs are firing cost a lot less of the ammo resource than the bullets that you fire. We could balance it that way so that you're not, so it's not free to have your NPCs running around firing guns. But it's also not, they're actually using a difficult to replace resource that I intended to use myself. And so I thought that was a good idea. The problem was that resource system was probably not a good idea. And so actually there were 2 problems. Number one, that resource system would have been hard to follow. Try to talk about like how much something was going to cost, how much of a resource I actually have. If it's all in these tiny, tiny, tiny increments, that starts to get silly and hard to talk about, hard to think about. And I was going to display it in the HUD, in the UI, as like a number with like a circle around it, and the circle would be full if it was ready to go up to the next number, and it would empty out before going down to the previous number. I was coming up with visual ways to do it, but still, it was going to be hard to make that work. And so, so we didn't do it, and so that was necessary for being able to take those tiny, tiny increments of ammo. You needed a system like that, so it wasn't going to work. And the other problem was, drawing from that central resource would mean that all of the character AI would have to be aware of the facility system. And right now, they're actually not. The facility system will post stuff to like buffs, for instance. If it's got, if you're enacting a buff via the facility system, it will say, okay, this buff is on, this buff is going, and then the character can check to see if that buff is going and can apply it to themselves. There's like places that the character can look at the consequences of what's going on in the facility system, but the character AI is not actually aware of the resources, and it's not aware of the facilities, and making that happen was also going to make it just more expensive and difficult to implement. And so that was another argument already, like, against it, like, okay, neat idea, Jeffrey, but it's actually going to be harder to put together than you think because you're not a programmer and you don't think through it the same way that programmers do. But then also the resource system wasn't going to work that way. And so too many arguments against costing ammo to have the characters fire their guns. But yeah. So M. Haxel says, well, maybe followers could consume ammo daily instead. So that's what having it work. Like, I think when you have a watchtower and it's being used, like, for instance, if they weather a siege in your absence, we do charge you ammo for them doing massive uses of ammo. Signing on for a certain amount of ammo expenditures just by giving them guns at all, I think players would feel like, well, it's convenient for me to give them guns so that when I switch to them, I have a gun. I don't want to not give them a gun. But then if giving them guns costs an ammo resource, I think that would probably create a chore for the player. They're like, well, I have to unequip their gun every time I switch away from them, and that's just a thing they have to do in order to save resources. I think people would resent us for that, for either taking their resource or making them do a chore. If that's their choice, they'll feel like we created an unnecessary, not fun choice. Okay, I promise that was the last viewer question that I made while I was playing Pacific Drive. Here you go. There's a subscribe button and links to other videos. Click on those, and I'll see you later. That's the next one. That's the last one.